Judge, at this time, the state will call Rylene Nolan.
All right, now that the witness is sworn, let me just inquire before we start with the examination. Have you previously viewed any of the trial testimony in this case, listened to it, or read about it?
I have not.
Okay, thank you for that. Please respond to any questions verbally so we can keep a clear record. Please try to avoid speaking at the same time as anyone that's questioning you, and talk directly into that microphone so we get a good record. And with that in mind, Mr. Wood, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you. Can you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Rylene, R-Y-L-E-N-E, Nowlin, N-O-W-L-I-N.
Thank you. Where are you employed?
I am employed by the Idaho State Police Forensic Services Laboratory in Meridian, Idaho.
In what capacity are you employed?
I am the Forensic Laboratory Manager.
Could you please tell the jury your educational background and related work experience that brought you to the position you have now?
I have a Bachelor of Science from the College of Idaho. I've completed hundreds of hours of training in biology screening as well as DNA analysis. I began my career in forensics with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services Laboratory in 2002. I was a bench analyst or an everyday scientist in the biology DNA unit until my promotion to laboratory manager in 2014. My duties included analyzing items of evidence for the presence of body fluids, as well as processing items of evidence for a DNA profile. I was also qualified in the DNA database unit, which is analyzing samples from convicted offenders for upload to the National DNA database. Since promoting to lab manager, I have retained my qualifications in the DNA unit. My duties as lab manager include overseeing the day-to-day operations of the laboratory. I supervise the heads of each department in the laboratory, and I oversee our evidence unit.
Thank you. Do you belong to any professional organizations?
Yes.
Which ones?
I am a member of the Northwest Association of Forensic Scientists, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the Association of Crime Laboratory Directors, the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors. I'm also a molecular biology fellow with the American Board of Criminalistics.
And have you testified as an expert regarding DNA analysis previously?
Yes.
Approximately how many times?
Approximately 85 times prior to today.
Okay. And have you done, how many times have you tested DNA?
I would say over the course of 20 years, I've tested thousands of samples.
Okay. Let's talk about DNA for a minute. At a 101 level, what is DNA?
DNA is a substance that's found in the cells of our body, and it acts as a blueprint. It tells our bodies not only what form to take, but how to function.
Okay, and so do we all have different DNA?
Between individuals, with the exception of identical twins, our DNA is over 99% the same. And in forensics, we're targeting that less than 1% that's unique to an individual, again, with the exception of identical twins.
Okay, so for any two people in this room, their DNA is about 99% the same.
That's correct. That's why we all have the same basic form and our bodies function in the same way.
Okay. Which body fluids contain DNA?
DNA is found in the cells in our body. So, for instance, in our saliva, it's our cheek cells that are sloughed off into that saliva. In our sweat, it's our skin cells that are sloughed off into that. DNA is also found in our bones and teeth as well.
Okay. And how can DNA testing be used in forensics?
In forensics, again, we're looking at those portions of DNA that are unique to an individual. They don't tell me anything about an individual. I can't tell you what color eyes they have, what color hair, how tall they are, but I can use that profile that's generated from an item of evidence and compare it to known individuals in a case to determine the source.
Okay. And what do you mean by profile?
A DNA profile is developed in our laboratory. We look at multiple different locations on the DNA. And half of our DNA comes from our mom and half from our father. And in looking at those, you receive one variable from each parent. So if I can compare it to blood typing, it's a letter. So we're looking at, did you receive an A from one parent and a B from another parent, so you're an AB? This is the same, except we're looking at many more locations, and instead of a letter, it's a number.
Okay. And what is the process to determine who a forensic sample originated from?
It's a multi-step process. The first step, as I mentioned, DNA is found in our cells. So the first step is to break open those cells and pull the DNA out, and then remove all of the other cellular components from that sample. The next step is a process for determining how much DNA is present in that sample. Once that's determined, because in forensics we are typically looking at very low amounts of DNA, the next step is called molecular xeroxing. And it's similar to you have a whole dictionary, but you only want to look at 24 pages in that dictionary. So you're just going to copy those particular pages. Those are those specific locations on the DNA of interest in forensics. And it copies them 1,000,000-fold so that there is enough present to visualize. It's then put on an instrument called a genetic analyzer, and that is what interprets the DNA and gives those number assignments at each of the locations.
And those number assignments at each of those locations, is that called a DNA profile?
We refer to that as a DNA profile, yes.
Okay. So once you generate a DNA profile, what can you do with that? Can you compare it to other DNA profiles?
Yes, it can be compared to other profiles if there was DNA on multiple items of evidence in a case, and it can also be compared to known samples from individuals involved in a case.
Okay. Is this method widely accepted by the scientific community?
Yes, it is.
And what steps do you take to ensure the process works correctly?
There are multiple steps that are taken to ensure the process works correctly. There are controls built into the system. So there are samples known as negative controls. Essentially, they go through the same process as all of the other samples, but no DNA is added to those. So at the end, they should be free from DNA. If there's any DNA present in those, then we have to go back and look to see if something happened. There also is a sample of a known DNA profile. So at the end, I can look at that and make sure the correct profile was obtained so that I know the process worked correctly. In addition, we have multiple safeguards built in. So when I go into the laboratory, everything is bleached down, clean paper is put down. I prepare myself by wearing a lab coat, a mask, gloves. My hair is pulled back. Only one item of evidence is ever open at a time, and evidence samples are processed separately in time and space from samples from known individuals.
Okay. Is the Idaho State Police Lab an accredited DNA forensics lab?
Yes, we are.
What accreditation standards do you meet?
We are accredited through the American Association for Laboratory Accreditation, commonly known as A2LA. We are accredited under the ISO 17025, and that's the International Organization for Standards 17025 are standards specific to laboratories, just in general laboratories. They have a separate set of standards known as R221, and those are the standards specific to forensic laboratories, so we have to be accredited to all of those standards. In addition, because Idaho State Police Forensic Services uploads samples to the National DNA Database, the FBI has established a separate set of standards known as the Quality Assurance Standards for forensic casework laboratories that we also must adhere to and be audited under.
And just, I should have asked you this earlier. Oh, no, I did ask you that earlier. Never mind. Were you assigned to work at case M2020-2233?
Yes, I was assigned to work some items of evidence in that case.
Does this case correspond to the state of Idaho versus Lori Daybell or Lori Vallow?
Yes, it does.
Okay. For your involvement, what items were sent forward for DNA testing in this case?
The items that I was specifically asked to examine were, do you want the laboratory case item number or just a description?
Just a description at this time.
So the first item were biological samples said to be collected from Tylee Ryan, and that consisted of molars and a section of rib. I was also given biological samples said to have been collected from a Joshua J. Vallow, also consisted of molars and a section of rib. I was also given known samples from individuals in the case, specifically Mr. Dennis Trahan, Trahan, as well as Ms. Vallow.
Okay. Let's talk about Tylee Ryan. Did you do any DNA testing regarding Tylee Ryan?
Yes, I did.
What did you do?
I performed DNA analysis of one of the molars that was submitted, and that process involves thoroughly cleaning the exterior of the tooth to remove any surface contaminants or bacteria that could be present, and then taking that tooth and creating it a pulverized powder, and then that powder is what went forward through that multi-step DNA process that I explained earlier to generate a DNA profile from that item.
Okay. And were you able to generate a profile from that item?
Yes, I was.
And did you do any comparisons between that DNA profile and any other known DNA profiles?
I did.
Who did you compare it against?
I compared it to a DNA profile generated from the sample from Lori Vallow.
Did you write a report detailing the results of that testing?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What were those results?
The comparison I performed was, sorry, that's echoing a little bit, was to determine if Lori Vallow could be a possible parent to the deceased individual said to be Tylee Ryan. So I calculated a statistic. It's known as the single parentage index. And what I determined was that Lori Vallow could not be excluded from being the biological mother of the deceased individual said to be Tylee Ryan. The single parentage index, which is a statistical calculation for the locations of DNA that I examined, was 2,528,000,000, and that 99.9999% of the female population would be expected to be excluded from being a biological mother of the deceased individual said to be Tylee Ryan.
Okay. Is there a way to get to 100% of excluding every other woman as being the mother of Tylee Ryan?
In paternity statistics and paternity calculations, I'm basing it on a population database. And that number I gave, that 2 billion number, that's a likelihood ratio. So it's comparing the two hypotheses. So the first hypothesis is Lori Vallow is the biological mother of the deceased individual. And the second hypothesis is she's not. So that's calculating how likely are those two hypotheses. And the only way to get to 100%, because you're only looking at one half of an individual's DNA, would be to test every woman in the world and compare to that sample.
Okay. But can you just state again for the record what number of women, the percentage, are excluded from being the mother of Tylee Ryan?
Based on the locations of DNA that were analyzed, it's expected that 99.9999% of women would be excluded from being the biological mother of the deceased individual said to be Tylee Ryan.
And what was the statistical likelihood that Lori Vallow is the mother in this DNA testing of Tylee Ryan?
So to state that differently, it is 2,528,000,000 times more likely that Lori Vallow is the mother of the deceased individual as opposed to another randomly selected woman from the population being the mother.
Okay. And I realize the way I was asking that question is probably not totally appropriate because we're talking about samples, correct? And so that was based on the known sample of Lori Vallow and then the sample from the molar of what was assumed to be Tylee Ryan, correct?
Correct. I did a comparison of those two items.
Did you do any DNA testing related to J.J. Vallow?
I did. I had the tooth sample said to be from Joshua J. Vallow.
Was there anything remarkable about that tooth sample?
The tooth sample was different than any I have seen previously in that when I broke open the tooth, there were still, I guess the best word to say is plump blood vessels still present inside the tooth.
Okay. And what steps did you take in that DNA testing?
I performed the same process as described earlier. The only difference is I had to use forceps, fancy name for tweezers, to peel those blood vessels out because bones are treated differently than other types of tissue, so I needed to separate those and process them differently.
Okay. And how did you process both those items?
I did.
And were you able to generate a DNA profile for those items?
I was.
And between the molar and those vessels, were those profiles identical?
They were.
Okay. Did you compare that sample against any other known samples?
I did. That sample was compared against a sample from a Mr. Dennis Trahan.
Okay. And what were the results of that comparison?
Again, I was looking to see if Mr. Trahan could be a biological parent of the deceased individual. I performed the same statistical calculations, and so I couldn't exclude him from being a biological parent. And for the locations of DNA examined, the single parentage index was 602,000, and the probability of exclusion, other men would be excluded from being the biological father, was 99.9999%.
Okay. And did you put that information in a lab report?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Your Honor, the state has no further questions at this time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
All right. That will conclude the testimony of this witness then. Is the witness allowed to be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
No objection.
All right. The witness may be released. Also, thank you for your testimony today. The bailiff will help you be escorted off the bench to out of the court.
Thank you.
In terms of scheduling, I'll inquire of the state. Do you want to get another witness started at this time or perhaps look at the lunch break?
I think it'd be a good time to start the lunch break, Your Honor.
Okay. We will go ahead and take our lunch recess then. We will plan on starting back up by no later than 12:45.
All right, please.
Thank you. Please be seated. Let's have the jurors brought in, please.
All right, please. Jury's all present, count for your honor.
Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. Okay, we're back on the record on case CR 22-21-1624, State of Idaho versus Lori Vallow. The state's continuing with its case in chief. The jurors are all present and accounted for, properly seated. The defense is here as well as the defendant and the prosecution. Counsel, just before we get started here, I wanted to discuss briefly the scheduling we have. We'll need to be done today by 3:20 instead of 3:30, just so council's aware. And then in terms of tomorrow, we've determined we're going to have a shortened schedule tomorrow. We're going to go from 8:30 until 1:30 tomorrow, and we're not going to do a full lunch break, but we will provide something during one of the breaks for the jurors to have something so they don't have to go clear till 1:30 without lunch. So that's going to be the schedule for this afternoon and tomorrow. Mr. Wood, then, I believe when we left off, we needed to have another witness called at this time. Is that correct?
Yes, the state would call Katie Dace.
Okay.
Testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
All right, before you get started with your direct, Mr. Wood, let me just inquire of the witness briefly. Have you at any time viewed any of the trial testimony in this case, either through online exposure to that, looking it up, or reading it anywhere?
No.
Okay, thank you for your response there. While you're testifying, please make sure to talk directly into the microphone. Please make verbal responses to any questions so we can keep the record clear, and avoid talking at the same time as anyone asking you a question. So with that in mind, Mr. Wood, you can inquire on your direct.
Thank you. Ms. Dace, could you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Catherine Dace, D-A-C-E.
What is your occupation or profession?
I am a forensic biologist and supervisor with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services in Meridian, Idaho.
Okay. And how long have you been employed by the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab?
Since 2016.
Okay. Is that the first forensics lab you've worked at?
No.
What other labs have you worked at?
I began my career in 2008 with the Denver Police Department in Denver, Colorado. I worked there for approximately 4 years. After that, I went to work for a military contractor performing DNA services overseas for approximately 1 year. After that, in 2014, I went to work for the Texas Department of Public Safety in Austin, Texas. And then in 2016, I came to Idaho.
Would you describe your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree in forensic biology from West Virginia University.
And did your formal education include the study of DNA?
It did.
Did that education include hands-on work with DNA testing techniques?
It did.
Are you certified by any boards?
Yes, I am certified by the American Board of Criminalistics in molecular biology.
Okay. And what are your duties and responsibilities at the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab?
As a forensic scientist, my job is to examine items of evidence for the presence of biological fluids and materials, attempt to generate DNA profiles from those items, and then make comparisons to known samples. As a supervisor, my job is to supervise other employees and manage budgets and things like that.
Okay. Did you receive evidence in the case of the state of Idaho versus Lori Vallow?
I did.
And is that identified in your lab by the number M2020-2233?
It is.
What evidence did you receive in this case?
I received autopsy samples from J.J. Vallow to include hand swabs, nail swabs, oral swabs, rectal swabs, and penile swabs. I also received tape and plastic from the body and burial site. I received some swabs from an apartment, 565 Pioneer 175. I received a chain and pendant, and I also received 18 hand tools from a garage/barn at the Daybell property. Lastly, I received a few reference samples as well.
Okay. Did you mention receiving bags?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about those real quick. Did you ever find, were you ever able to locate or generate a DNA profile from any material on any of the bags you were provided?
The bags from the burial site?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Did you ever do any testing on any duct tape?
I did.
Can you tell us what type of testing you did?
Yes, I received duct tape from the hands, ankles, and mouth, and then duct tape with a plastic bag from around the head, and tape and plastic that the body was wrapped in. I examined these items with the latent print examiner at the same time, and most of the tape and plastic had apparent blood and decomposition fluid present, so I tested all those items for blood, which was positive. As far as DNA testing goes on the tape, I was looking at the tape ends for any irregular edges that could maybe indicate that someone had torn the tape with their teeth and left behind saliva. So I did swab a couple areas of that. And then lastly, I assisted Tara, the latent print examiner, with collecting hairs and fibers from the tape.
Okay. Excuse me. You said that some of that fluid tested positive for blood.
It did.
And where was that located specifically?
Really all over the surface of everything, all over the surface of the tape and the plastic.
Did you do any DNA testing on that?
No.
Okay. How come?
It was pretty clear it was decomposition fluid from the victim, and at this point we were trying to identify DNA that might be from the perpetrator, so it was not of evidentiary value.
Okay. You mentioned a chain and pendant that you received. Did you test those for the presence of blood?
I did.
Okay. And were you able to find any blood on those?
No, they were negative.
Okay. And you mentioned some swabs from apartment 175.
Yes.
Tell us what you did with those items.
There was a swab from a knife, and I tested that for blood, and it was negative. There was also a swab from a wall, and I tested that, and it was extremely weak positive, presumptively, for blood. And that was all the testing I did on those items.
Okay. Ms. Dace, I want to talk to you about some of the tools you received. Do you recall what tools you received?
Yes, there were 18 hand tools. It was a variety of shovels, a pickaxe, a pair of shears, a post hole digger, and several hand saws.
Okay. And did you do any type of testing on these tools?
I did.
Overall, what type of testing did you do with those tools?
I was looking for blood and potential human remains, so I did do blood testing on the tools, and then I also examined the surfaces for anything I thought that could be biological.
Okay. Did you find anything that you considered to be of evidentiary value?
Yes, I found several presumptive positive blood stains on the tools, and on several of the tools I thought I found what could be charred flesh.
Okay. And what did you do with those tools specifically?
So I photographed them and collected what I found, and then I selected 4 samples of the potential flesh to run for DNA testing. Prior to that, I took photographs of that material with a stereo microscope to get a better visual sample or visual representation, and then I took portions of each of those for DNA analysis.
Can you tell the jury what a stereo microscope is?
It's a version of a microscope that is for items you can already see with the naked eye, unlike other microscopes where you're maybe looking at things that are otherwise invisible. So in this case, what I was looking at, I could already see, but you could not see, very clearly.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be handed State's Exhibit 201A through 201Q. Ms. Stace, do you recognize, or will you take a moment and look through State's Exhibit 201A through 201Q, and when you're done, let me know when you're done reviewing it.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Do you recognize State's Exhibits 201A through 201Q?
I do.
What do they purport to be?
They are photos I've taken during my examinations.
And are these photos that you took yourself?
Yes.
And are they true? Well, what are they photos of?
There are photos of the tools that I examined, some of the material I collected from the tools, and some of the material under the stereoscope. And then the last photo is of some hairs from the tape.
Okay. Are these true and accurate representations of the photographs you took?
They are.
Your Honor, I'd ask that State's Exhibit 201A through 201Q be entered into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, may I voir dire and aid?
Yes.
So on each one of these photographs, Ms. Dace, there are writings and some annotations. Did you superimpose those onto these photographs?
Yes.
Okay. So when he says, are these true and accurate photographs of what were taken, they are true and accurate to the extent that they hadn't been altered by this photoshopping or this superimposing other things on top?
No. All of these labels were made using Microsoft Paint.
Okay. But you superimposed them onto the photographs?
Yes.
Okay. With that explanation, Your Honor, I have no objection.
All right, thank you. Mr. Thomas, the exhibits 201A through Q are all admitted.
Sorry.
Ms. Dace, if I speak about item 36.4, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, it is one of the shovels.
Is that a number that was your lab assigned to that tool?
Yes, there were several tools in one bag, and that was item 36, and so each tool received a sub-item 1 through 5.
Okay. So tell me about item 36.4.
It was a shovel that I examined, and on the blade of the shovel, I identified material I thought I might want to run for DNA.
Okay. Your Honor, may I publish to the jury?
Yes.
Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, that is my photo.
What is that a photograph of?
A shovel.
Is that item 36.4?
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the these things that have been superimposed? What does that mean?
Oh, I am outlining areas that I sampled, that I swabbed. So in addition to looking for blood or biological remains, I was also swabbing the tools for preservation.
Okay. And can you describe what we're seeing in State's Exhibit 201B?
That is a close-up photo of the blade of the shovel, and that is circling in the light blue what I collected.
Okay. And State's, what do you observe in State's Exhibit 201C?
In the previous photo, you could see the area that I circled. This is what I collected off of it, and this is under the stereoscope stereo microscope. And then the blue box is outlining the portion that I took for DNA analysis.
Okay. And were you able to generate a DNA profile from that material?
I was not.
Okay. Can you tell me about State's Exhibit, or I'm sorry, Lab Item 36.5?
It is another shovel.
Okay. Can you tell me what you observe in State's Exhibit 201D?
It is a shovel that is item 36.5.
Okay. And did you do any type of testing on this?
Yes, I also collected some material that I photographed under the stereoscope and ran for DNA.
Okay. What was it about that material that that caught your attention?
When I'm looking at these shovels and you're looking at dirt and some of the shovels had what appeared like ashes on them, these fragments had a different appearance. They did not look like something that's normally in dirt. They looked like they could possibly be flesh, but it's difficult to know when you had a body subjected to fire. So I simply photographed them and then attempted DNA to see if it would work.
Okay. And what do you observe in State's Exhibit 201E?
The line on the right side of the photo is pointing at what I saw when I had brushed away some dirt. And that material that's kind of a pinkish tan color is what I collected.
Okay. And what do you observe in State's Exhibit 201F?
This is the piece of that material that I ran for DNA, and this is the photo of it underneath the stereo microscope.
Were you able to obtain a DNA profile from that sample?
I was not.
There's a blue box. What does that represent?
That is the portion that I took for DNA. The remainder was not consumed for DNA.
Can you tell me about State's or lab item number 36.1?
Yes, it is a pickaxe from that bag of tools.
Okay, let me circle back. I'm going to actually ask you about item 36.3 first.
It is a shovel from that same bag of tools.
Okay. Can you tell me what you observe in State's Exhibit 201G?
This is a photograph that I took of the tool, and it is labeled 36.5.
Okay, and
Or, excuse me, 36.3.
okay, thank you. What, if anything, did you do with this tool?
Again, I looked for blood and collected debris and other material from the blade of the shovel.
Okay. And what do you observe in State's Exhibit 201H?
This is a photo of the back side of the blade of the shovel, and that circled area represents some material I collected for DNA testing.
Okay. Why did you collect that?
It had a somewhat soft texture and again seemed like it could possibly be biological remains.
Okay. And what do you observe in State's Exhibit 36, or I'm sorry, State's Exhibit 201I?
That is a photograph of that material on the back of the shovel, now removed from the shovel and taken by itself.
And what do you observe in State's Exhibit 201J?
This is a photograph of that material underneath the stereo microscope, and the area outlined with the blue box indicates the portion that I took for DNA testing.
Okay. And there's something labeled green material. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
Okay, so you didn't test that material.
No.
Does the Idaho State Forensic Lab, do you test any materials?
Like trace analysis?
Yes.
We do not have a trace section at our laboratory.
Okay. In regards to item 36.3, were you able to obtain a DNA profile?
I was.
How did you do that?
DNA testing begins with identifying a sample that you want to run for DNA. I then take a portion of that sample and put it into a tube with unique case identifiers on it. I then break open all the cells to release the DNA, and then I determine how much DNA is present in the sample, called quantification. From there, we copy the specific locations of DNA that make our forensic DNA profile, and I then visualize those copies, which look like peaks on a graph. Once I have my DNA profiles for a case, I can begin to make my comparisons.
Okay. Did you receive any known DNA profiles prior to your testing?
Yes.
Who did you receive known DNA profiles for?
For me specifically, I received a sample from Chad Daybell, a sample from Melanie Gibb, and a sample from Richard Mao. The laboratory itself also received other reference samples.
Okay. And did you receive any other known samples from within your lab?
Yes, from J.J. Vallow, from Tylee Ryan, from Lori Vallow, and I believe Dennis Trahan.
Okay. So this item,
Dennis Trahan.
I'm going to put this back up. This item in 201J was located on the back of that shovel. After you obtained a DNA profile, did you compare it to any other known profiles?
I did.
Did you find any match? Or what did your comparison show?
The DNA profile obtained from item 36.3.5 matched that obtained from the reference sample of Tylee Ryan. This DNA profile is at least 604 octillion times more likely to be seen if Tylee Ryan is the source than if an unrelated, randomly selected individual from the general population is the source.
Okay. Can you say that number one more time?
604 octillion.
How many zeros is octillion?
27.
Okay. Can you tell me about lab item 36.1?
It is a pickaxe from that bag of tools.
Okay. Can you tell me what you observe in States Exhibit 201K?
This is a photo of the pickaxe that I took and is labeled 36.1.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you do with this tool?
I tested it for blood and also examined debris and foreign material that I collected from the eye of the pickaxe.
And can you tell the jury what you observe in States Exhibit 201L?
This is a photograph of the head of the pickaxe. The circle in the center is referred to as the eye of the pickaxe. And when examining it, there was brown colored dirt present, which you see on the left side of the photo. That was on the outside. And then when that was removed, there was a much darker material present around the eye in that area, which I collected, and that's more in the center of the photograph.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States Exhibit 2010. Is that the same pickaxe?
Yes, it's a close-up of that material still present on the eye that you can see kind of, where it was located.
I'm going to go back to State's Exhibit 201L. And perhaps you already answered it, but what was the difference between, I'm going to point at this material here and this material there?
The material on the left looked more like dirt. That's not anything that's a scientific conclusion. That's apparent, that appears visible to me. And then the material in the center was very dark, and it was it had an oily texture. When it was removed from the eye of the pickaxe, the metal ring appeared to have kind of a dark, greasy ring around it. And then in the material were some larger fragments.
Tell me what you observe in State's Exhibit 201N, as in November.
These are the larger pieces of fragments that I removed from that dark, kind of black material from the eye of the pickaxe. And then at the bottom, that blue line is pointing to the piece that I selected to photograph and run for DNA.
Can you tell me what you observe in State's Exhibit 201P?
This is a view of that material underneath the stereo microscope, and the blue box represents the area I ran for DNA.
Were you able to obtain a DNA profile from that subject matter?
I was able to obtain a partial DNA profile from this item.
And what do you mean by a partial DNA profile?
For a DNA profile, we look at 24 locations, and there are times when we do not have enough DNA or the DNA is degraded, and we get results for just some of the locations, and that's referred to as a partial DNA profile.
All right. And are you still able to do a comparative analysis with a partial DNA profile?
For this partial profile, yes.
Okay. And is it accepted in the scientific community to do a comparative analysis with a partial profile?
Yes.
Okay. What were the results? Well, what known samples did you compare this against?
I compared it against the known samples previously mentioned from this case.
Okay. So can you just say it again for the record, which names
Yes.
those would be?
So in this case, the DNA profile obtained was a female. So in that case, we would just make comparisons to the female references. So I compared it to Lori Vallow and Tylee Ryan. And I'm not sure if at this time we had the reference sample from Melanie Gibb. I'm not sure.
Okay. From your comparative analysis, did you come to any conclusions?
Yes.
What were those?
Tylee Ryan is a potential contributor to this partial DNA profile. This DNA profile is at least 159 trillion times more likely to be seen if it originated from Tylee Ryan than if it originated from an unrelated, randomly selected individual from the general population.
Did you do any other testing on item 36.1?
Yes, there were some stains that tested presumptively positive for blood on the handle.
Can you describe what you observed in State's Exhibit 201M?
These are the two areas that tested positive, or two of the areas that tested positive on the handle.
What did they test positive for?
Blood.
Okay. And were you able to do any further testing on those samples?
Yes, I swabbed those samples and ran the entire swab for DNA.
Okay. Were you able to obtain a DNA profile from those samples?
I was.
Okay. Did you do that in the same manner in which you've described preparing a DNA profile before?
Yes.
Okay. And you were able to obtain a profile?
Yes.
Did you do any comparative analysis with that profile against other known profiles?
I did.
What was were you able to reach a conclusion?
The DNA profile from item 36.1.3 matched that obtained from the reference sample of Tylee Ryan. Again, this DNA profile is at least 604 octillion times more likely to be seen if Tylee Ryan is the source than if an unrelated, randomly selected individual from the general population is the source.
Ms. Stace, you talked earlier about examining duct tape.
Yes.
Is there a hierarchy of testing, and maybe that's not the best way to say it. Is there a priority of different types of forensic testing for an item such as duct tape?
Yes, and it depends on the specific case. However, when you are looking at duct tape that was attached to a person, it's very likely to find their DNA, and it can be very difficult to find DNA from someone else, since the duct tape itself is going to take the DNA from the skin it was touching or the clothing that it was touching. Especially with the presence of blood and decomposition fluid, the chances of getting a foreign DNA profile were quite low, and in this case, I only swabbed a few of the tape ends for saliva and then left the rest of the tape for latent print analysis.
Okay. Ms. Stace, are you aware if any items that you collected were ever sent to any other labs for further testing?
I believe some of the trace we collected from the tape was sent to another laboratory.
Okay. Can you tell me what you observe in States Exhibit 201Q?
These are some of the hairs that were collected from the tape from the plastic and duct tape that the body was wrapped in.
So this is the black bag and duct tape that were on the exterior of JJ, correct?
Yes,
Okay. So it wasn't the duct tape wrapped around his arms?
correct.
Okay. Is there a pointer up there?
Disappointer.
It's hard to see through the projector. On the yellow sticky pad marked as B, is there a hair on there?
Yes, it is on the top half of the piece of paper, and it kind of goes like that.
Okay. And is that a hair that you collected?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to test that hair?
No.
Okay. Are you aware if that hair was sent to any other lab for testing?
Yes, it was sent to Bodie Labs.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state has no further questions at this time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Thomas, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's okay. Now they're definitely not in order. Ms. Dace, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So, looks like you are currently a forensic biologist with the ISP lab, is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And are I got some of your work history. It looks like you worked at the Texas Department of something. Which department did you work at?
Texas Department of Public Safety in Austin, Texas.
And what did you do for them?
The same thing. I was an analyst, so I processed items of evidence and generated DNA profiles.
Okay. Similar to the work you do at the ISP lab?
Correct.
And is that the Texas version of the ISP lab?
Yes.
Okay, good. And you do supervisory work at the ISP lab?
Yes, since 2020.
Okay. But you also do analysis, or is that no longer, you don't anymore do analysis, or is that part of your job as
I
well?
still do it. Yeah, we're a pretty small lab.
Okay, all right. Looks like you received some autopsy samples, some tape and some plastic, and the state kind of walked you through a lot of that. I'm a little bit interested in the hair that you found. Do you recall which sample you found that hair on?
The hair that was in the picture just a minute ago?
Yeah, and on the little yellow sticky
Yes, that was, I believe, from 11.8, so the piece of tape 8 from item 11.
Okay. And you don't know where that came from on the plastic or wherever. That just came to you as a piece of tape?
No, it came to us. Some of the tape was still on the plastic. However, the latent print examiner did that deconstruction, so she would probably be able to better answer that question.
So it first went to the latent print examiner, and then it went to you?
Yeah, when we received it, it was in the latent print lab, and we did open it together, but some of the tape had to be unstuck from itself, and that's a slow process. So I was not in there for the whole thing. So I would come back and help when she was ready, and then a lot of times the tape was already taken apart and set up.
Okay. And is that Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Okay. And so how long did that process take of taking the tape apart? And then when I guess what I'm asking, let me just start over. When was it that you saw the hair on the tape? Was that something that was brought to your attention, or was that something that you brought to Tara's attention or Ms. Martinez's attention?
It was simply part of our examination process. So before before the tape needed to go for latent processing, we wanted to remove what we could. So once the tape was unstuck and ready to be examined, I believe we went through it together, but I know that I was looking at each piece of tape and pulling off any hairs or fibers that I thought could be collected.
Mm-hmm. And how did this tape come to you? Was it kind of in a ball, or was it just layered, or how? I mean, when you're saying you had to unstick some of this stuff.
Yeah. It was inside an autopsy bag, so the medical examiner's bag, and I believe most of the tape was still stuck to the bag in a way that indicated it probably had been received that way from the burial site, so it hadn't been all taken off. I think a few pieces may have come loose, but those photographs were all taken by Tara.
Okay. And so inside the autopsy bag, you said there was like some fluid, loose fluid and things floating around in there. Is that right? Or was I mistaken? Yeah? Okay. And so that's where this tape was as well?
Yes, and the black plastic.
And the black plastic. So the autopsy bag wasn't the black plastic bag?
Correct. It's a black autopsy bag containing black plastic and the tape.
I see. Okay. And so floating within this black autopsy bag, and when you say bag, autopsy bag, it's a body bag? Is that what I'm thinking?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So probably 6 feet long, and it's got a zipper on it, and you unzip it,
Yes.
and inside there's all the stuff that was floating around.
Correct.
Okay. So is it possible that this hair could have been part of that stuff that was floating around and got stuck on some of that tape?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You identified a couple of shovels that you thought might have DNA on it, and then you tested it and weren't able to get a profile, right?
Yes, 36.4 and 36.5.
Okay. And then you did DNA on one, and you got a match on a small particle that had Tylee's DNA on it, right?
Correct.
Okay. And when you get these big numbers of the possibility that it could be somebody else, that's based on a formula that you generate?
Yes.
Okay. And so do you know what the current state of the, how do I want to say this? The DNA population that has been collected. Do you know the current state of that? Well, how many DNA samples we have or that you have to use in that?
There is a population database that was generated by the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and that is what we use.
Right. And do you know how many samples are in there? I know my sample's not in there.
No, it's not. It's from known individuals who participated in the study. I believe it's around 1,700.
1,700.
Yes.
Okay. 1,700?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
I don't think it's exactly 1,700, but it's right around there.
Right. And you're basing that on on a number, and there's a separate one if someone was Native American, right? They would have to go into a separate database, or there is a separate, how do I say this, separate formula for people that are Native American, right?
For some of the really small populations, there are separate databases that more accurately represent the DNA frequencies of their population.
Right. And so you don't know if Tylee Ryan is part Native American?
No, we only perform those calculations by request. So we don't know the ethnicity of anyone in our case unless someone were to ask us.
Right.
That. Yeah.
Okay. So your calculations are basically based on this formula, which is kind of taken from these 1,700 people that have put their database in, or their DNA into the database?
It's actually not in any sort of, it's not a database the way you'd think of in terms of a law enforcement database. It's a research sample set. And everyone in that database is a self-identified race. So there's Caucasian, Hispanic, and African American, and those are the three main ones. And if there were something different like Native American, that is a separate database set.
Okay. And you ran Tylee's off of the Caucasian database set.
So it actually runs off of all three, and we report the most common statistic or the lowest statistic. And in this case, that would be for Caucasian.
Okay. All right. And when did you run these tests on these DNA samples that you found on the shovel? When was that run?
I would need to refer to my notes to see those dates.
Sure, you want to do that?
Yes, please.
All right, we'll have the record reflect the witness is being shown her notes. You can hand those to her, Mr. Bailiff. Thank you.
So for 36.1.5 and 36.3.5, my report is dated in April of 2021.
Okay. And were you ever in contact with the FBI with regards to things that may need to be sent to other labs, like the FBI lab or those kinds of things?
No.
No? Okay. Did you think about possibly telling someone that you found, or I guess I need to know the thought process. There was some testimony earlier today where somebody testified to the fact that they didn't get any tools to make a tool mark analysis. Would this be something that you would, if you found evidence of DNA on a particular tool, that you would forward on to somebody else?
No, we only report our results back to the submitting agency.
Okay. And then it's on that submitting agency, the police department or the sheriff's department or the prosecutor, whoever submitted that, to follow through and submit that to somebody else.
Yes. In this case, the tools did remain in our laboratory pending permission to consume that the potential blood stain that was on the handle of the pickaxe. And so pending that decision making, the tools did stay in our custody.
Okay. All right, thank you. Nothing further.
All right.
I didn't need to use these.
And in addition, if you want to collect her notes once you've done that, thank you. Any redirect?
Just very briefly. Ms. Dace, both defense counsel and I have spoke to you about a hair that was collected from tape that was sent to another lab.
Yes.
Did that hair receive any identifying number?
It was 11.16.8B.
11.16.8B. Okay. I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wood.
No follow-up.
All right, that'll conclude the testimony of this witness then. Is the witness here under subpoena, and if so, can she be released?
She can be released, Your Honor.
We have no objection.
Okay, thank you for your testimony this afternoon. I'll have the bailiff help escort you out of the courtroom. All right, the state can call its next witness.
State would call Tara Martinez. And Judge, while she's being brought in, can we ask for a sidebar?
Yes. All right, let's have the witness brought forward then to be sworn.
Okay.
All right. We will accommodate any assistance you need getting up here, the bailiff, so please take your time. All right, before we begin the testimony here, let me just inquire of the witness briefly. Have you previously reviewed any of the trial testimony in this case, either by listening to it from any source or by viewing any of the viewing locations here,
No,
or
sir.
reading any of it?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. So with that in mind, in your testimony, please make sure to make verbal responses to any questions so we keep the record clear. Please try to avoid speaking at the same time of anyone that's questioning you. With that in mind, then, Ms. Smith, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you can do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Will you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please, and spell your last name?
Yes, my name is Tara Martinez, Martinez.
Okay. Ma'am, how are you employed?
I work for Idaho State Police Forensic Services,
Okay. What is your title?
Forensic Scientist 2.
Okay. And what do you do as a forensic scientist at the lab?
So I'm in the latent print section, so that means I process items of evidence to develop latent prints, and then I compare those fingerprints, and then I respond to crime scenes.
Okay. How long have you been at the Idaho State Lab?
7 years.
Okay. Do you have any special training to do your job duties?
Yes, I first have a Bachelor's of Science in Biological Science with a minor in Chemistry and a specialization in Forensic Science. And then I also went through a very extensive training program with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services, which included mock courts, testing, both written and verbal, as well as exercises. And I also had some external training.
Okay. And I forget, I don't know if I heard, forgive me, where did you graduate?
California State University, East Bay.
Okay. And are you a member of any professional organizations related to your job?
Yes, the International Association for Identification. I'm also a member of their Pacific Northwest Division.
Now, you earlier said that you process latent prints.
I process items of evidence to develop latent prints, or in hopes of developing latent prints.
Okay. What is a latent print?
A latent print, latent means unseen, so a latent print is something that generally you can't see on a surface and is left unintentionally. So if I'm touching this desk here, I might accidentally leave a print behind. That would be a latent print.
Now, what is the process used to develop a latent print in your examinations?
So it depends on the item. When I get an item into our laboratory, I'll first look at what is the item made out of, meaning is the item porous or non-porous? So like water bottles and glass and things like that are non-porous, meaning they don't absorb water, whereas porous would be paper. So I'd look at things like that to see what kind of surface this is. Then I would look at maybe the texture of the item, the color of the item, and these things would help me figure out what process would be most successful.
Now, do people always leave latent prints?
No, it depends on a variety of factors. First and foremost is you individually. Some people just have better skin to leave latent prints. Maybe they sweat a little bit more. Maybe they produce more amino acids. And so they're therefore able to leave better prints and more frequently leave prints behind. And then also the surface makes a big difference. Is it dusty? Is it dirty? Those kinds of surfaces won't generally leave latent prints behind. And then is the item textured? So all of these things factor into if you'll leave a latent print behind.
If a latent print is left behind, how is it you would collect a latent print?
So on a typical non-porous item like water bottle, metal, things like that, I first look at the item unaided, just my normal eye, to see if I see any latent prints that maybe are left behind in a little sweat. If I don't see anything, then I'll move forward and I'll look with an alternate light source, which is just gives you different colors of light. Try again to see if anything's left behind. Then I'll actually start the real processing, which starts with cyanoacrylate fuming or superglue fuming. And basically the superglue vaporizes into the air, becoming a gas, and it attaches into the latent print. It just attaches to the moisture in your print. So because prints are a lot of water, the glue likes to attach to the print. After that, I do a dye stain, which is generally makes the whole item stained, but again, it's more attracted to the glue prints because they're a different texture than the rest of the item. And then once that's done, I powder the item. So that's kind of like a general for like a non-porous item.
So when you talk, a lot of us think of fingerprinting as just dusting it with some powder. It sounds like there are multiple other steps.
Yes, dusting is one way to do it, but there are a lot of different techniques depending upon the item and what you're trying to look at.
Okay. If any of those processes work and you're able to sort of have a latent print appear, how do you go about comparing it to someone or something?
So the methodology is ACE-B. Each letter stands for something. So the first is A for analysis. So I have this print, I've developed it from processing, and I'm looking at the print overall to see, first, do I know what area of skin this print is from? Is it from the palm of your hand or is it from a fingertip? Stuff like that. And then I'll look at it to see what kind of distortion it has. Every print is going to have a little bit of distortion, so I'm going to see, is it smeared? Is it spotty? Things like that. And then I'll look at overall, do I think this print has value for comparison? Do I think it has enough information to be able to move on to the next step? And so the next step would be C, stands for comparison. And at that point, I'm doing the back and forth between the unknown print, meaning the latent print, and the known print. And I'm comparing the two to see the details in the unknown print, do they match the known print, or do they not match the known print? And so I'm going back and forth to see, are the details similar? Are they spaced the same? Do they appear to look the same? And then after that, I go to E, which is evaluation. So at that point, I'm saying, do I think that these two came from the same source, the unknown and the known? Or do I think they didn't come from the same source and I can exclude the two? Or third option would be, do I not have enough information to say either way? Is the print going to be inconclusive? And then at that point, I'm done with what I'm doing. And then the V stands for verification. So another analyst comes behind me and starts the process all over again.
Okay. So just so that I'm clear, because there was a lot there. All right. Analysis, you look at the latent print to see if it's of sufficient quality to compare to something.
Yes.
All right. And then you do a comparison.
Yes.
All right. So if you have a latent print left of an object, how would you find something to compare it to?
Generally, that information comes from the agency. They'll let us know these are the persons that could be involved in this case, and then I can get the fingerprints, the known prints from them directly, or I could get them through our database. So it just depends.
Okay, so when you say known prints, that's prints that someone took from someone who had an ID on them or have been identified with a particular person.
Yes.
Okay, and so you take the unknown that's on a surface and you compare it to known people that you have prints for.
Yes.
And you said something about a database. What do you mean a database?
Yes, so there's a few different databases we use. They're law enforcement databases, and the people could be in the database for a variety of different reasons. And so we can generally pull prints from that database to help us with our comparison.
Okay. Do you also sometimes go out and get prints from individuals so that you'll have copies as well?
Yes.
Okay. And then the evaluation process, was that the E?
That is the E.
Okay. And that is where you look at them to see whether you believe they're a match.
Yes.
Okay. And then verification process, that's when somebody else basically double checks your work?
Yeah, they start from the beginning. So they do their own analysis, their own comparison, and then they have to do their own evaluation, and then we have to come to some agreement.
Okay. So let's turn to your lab. I believe it's 2020, and then the numbers are 2233. Are you familiar with that lab number?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the lab number associated with Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, JJ Vallow, and Tylee Ryan?
Yes.
Okay. What was your first contact, if any, with that lab number?
My first contact was we were requested, myself and someone else was requested from our laboratory to assist Rexburg Police Department at the coroner's office to help obtain prints from JJ Vallow.
Okay. And did you go to the coroner's office and get JJ's fingerprints?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any other contacts with that case?
Yes. I later went to both Rexburg and St. Anthony to obtain fingerprints, footprints or foot exemplars, buccal swabs, and hair samples from Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
Okay. So you got fingerprint samples and samples that could be used in DNA?
Yes.
All right. Those would be their known prints and their known DNA sample?
Yes.
All right. Did you also obtain any known samples from Alex Cox?
I obtained known samples, not myself. So I got some through two different means. The first was the FBI database, or they're on file with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a fingerprint card. And then later I received other fingerprints from Gilbert Police Department in Arizona.
As a result of Alex Cox's autopsy?
Yes.
So you had two different known samples from Alex Cox?
Yes.
All right. Now, turning to that, in this case, did you do any actual latent print examinations?
Yes, I did latent print processing and comparison.
Okay. Can you tell us how you came in contact with the evidence that was submitted to the ISP lab in this case?
Yes, so I checked out items 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 18, and then I subsequently processed those items to try to develop latent prints.
Okay, let's break those down just so that we have a clear picture of what specific evidence you looked at. So item 10, what was your item 10?
Item 10 was a white drawstring bag with gray colored duct tape described from the agency as a bag around head JJ.
Okay. So it was a white bag that was around JJ's head.
That's what I was told, yes.
Okay, and that was identified as lab number 10.
Yes.
Okay. What was lab number 11?
Lab number 11 was a bundle or a mass of plastic bags and gray colored duct tape. The gray colored duct tape was labeled by myself as 11.1 through 11.11, and then the bags were labeled 11.12 through 11.15. And these were described by the agency as body bag and plastic, JJ.
Okay. So when you say body bag and plastic, was it the plastic, a black plastic with gray duct tape on it?
Yes, the item that I processed was a black pieces of black plastic and gray colored duct tape, but it was submitted to me in a plastic body type bag.
Okay. And you processed that. Let's just quickly talk about how you processed it without getting into the late print analysis. What did you have to do so that you could process that item 11, the black plastic with the gray duct tape on it?
So first, a lot of the duct tape was attached to itself. So to be able to process it fully, both the non-adhesive side or the non-sticky side and then the sticky side, I had to take it apart from itself. So all the plastic was pulled apart from the tape, and the tape was pulled apart from itself, and hairs were collected during that process. And then I proceeded to do the non-porous processing sequence, like I mentioned earlier. But the duct tape, because it has an adhesive side, I added an additional process that targets that area.
Okay. Well, there was a couple of things in there I want to make sure I understand. So that the tape that was attached to the black plastic and identified to you as from body bag, right? You took that tape apart?
Yes.
Right? You pulled it apart?
Yes.
Okay. And then did you examine the black plastic?
Yes, both were processed for latent prints, both the plastic pieces and the duct tape. They were just pulled apart from one another to be able to process individually.
And then in item 11, you indicated something about hairs. You found hairs?
Yes, anytime I'm processing an item and I find hairs, even though I don't process hairs, I collect them so that someone else may be able to do so. So I collected hairs in this item and put them back in its original packaging to be used later if needed.
Okay. And so when you say collected hairs, it's hairs off of that black plastic and the duct tape,
Yes.
the gray duct tape.
Yes.
Okay. So item 12, what was item 12?
Item 12 was one piece of gray colored duct tape, said by the agency to have been tape from mouth, JJ.
Okay. And what is item 13?
Item 13 was one mass of duct tape, gray again, and that was said to be from ankles of JJ.
Okay. And item 14?
Item 14 was also a mass of a bunch of duct tape, and that was said by the agency to be from hands of JJ.
Okay. And item 15?
I didn't have item 15.
I'm sorry, I misspoke.
18. 18 was one green-colored Letica Corporation piece of plastic, and that was said from the agency to be bucket bag 2 of 3 Tylee.
Okay. And what color was that?
Green.
Okay. So item 10, did you process it for the presence of any latent prints?
Yes.
Okay. Did you develop any usable prints on that white bag that was labeled JJ had?
No.
There were no usable prints on item 10?
No.
Okay. On item 11, that gray duct tape on the black plastic, did you develop any usable prints on item 11?
Yes.
Okay. Item 12, did you develop any usable prints on item 12, the piece of gray duct tape? I believe you said hands?
That was mouth.
That was mouth.
And no.
Okay. And item 13?
Yes, I developed latent prints.
Okay, and that was around?
That was around the feet of JJ, or said to be.
Around, item 13 was around what?
The feet, I'm sorry.
Okay. And item 14?
That was the tape around the hands, and I did not develop any latent prints there.
Okay. Were you able to pull any hairs off of that item 14?
I don't recall. I think there was hairs off of all the items, but I'd have to look at my notes to see specifically how many.
Okay. And were you able to develop any prints off of item 18?
No.
Okay. So just to be clear, which items did you get usable prints off of?
11 and 13.
Okay. Let's talk initially about item 13. Were you able to, after you developed some prints on item 13, were you able to compare them to any known samples?
Yes.
Okay. What knowns did you compare the prints on item 13 to?
Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, J.J. Vallow, and Alexander Lamar Cox.
Okay. And were you able to reach a definitive conclusion about whether they matched any of those individuals?
No.
Okay. And so was there an inconclusive finding?
There was an inconclusive finding on both of them for two different reasons.
What were those reasons?
One was it's latent print 13.1, and that was because of the quality of the print. Sometimes if the print just is very poor quality and doesn't provide a lot of information, it may be pushed through to, I can compare this print, but I just can't be certain on these details and can't rely upon them. So it ends up being inconclusive due to the quality of the print. The other one was inconclusive because of the area of skin the latent print was thought to have come from. I didn't have good recordings of those areas. So it was inconclusive, needing better knowns.
Okay. Now, what about item 11? You received usable prints. Were they of sufficient quality that you could do a comparison?
Yes.
Okay. In anticipation of your trial today, did you prepare an exhibit to aid you in explaining where you got those prints to the jury?
Yes.
Okay. Let me have, Your Honor, if I may I have the witness handed State's Exhibit 210, a copy of which has been given to both the court and the defense?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you recognize the pictures that are in State's Exhibit 210?
Yes.
What are they?
The first photo is an overall picture I generally take when I first receive the evidence in. So I can take it as to show how the evidence looked before I did any processing. So that's the first photo, and this is showing item 11.
Okay.
Would you like me to keep moving
Yeah,
on? Okay.
we'll have you describe each of them for
Okay.
the record, and then we'll show them all at once if they're admitted and the court permits.
Okay.
What's the second one?
The second photo is of item 11.12, so part of item 11 that has been, I've numbered out instead of just being item 11 with everything. This is 11.12. And the processing is done on the item, and I marked the latent print that I developed. So you can see an overall picture showing that this is where the print was found on the item.
And are each of those images fair and accurate pictures of what your observations were and of item 11 that you processed at the ISP lab in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move for the admission of State's Exhibit 210.
I have one more. Did you want me to look at the last one?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
The last one is a picture of 11.15. So again, it's a piece of item 11 that was processed, and it shows my marking showing that where the latent print was developed on this item.
With that record, Your Honor, I move for the admission of State's Exhibit 210.
Okay, and I just want to make clear, Counselor, before it's admitted and published, there were some modifications from the exhibit to the court's courtesy copy and counsel's, I believe, so.
Yes, Judge. It should be an exhibit of total of 3 pages, as discussed at sidebar, which would be the cover page and 2 pages with images shown to defense counsel and the court.
Okay, with the exhibit limited to that, which will be submitted as evidence to the jury, is there any objection from the defense?
Given that explanation, Your Honor, we have no objection.
Okay, then the exhibit will be admitted. That's 210.
Thank you. And permission to display for the jurors, Judge?
You may publish it.
Thanks. So the front page of 210 is just a title page, correct?
Yes.
Your name, your position, and your lab number?
Yes.
Okay. And moving to the second page of 210, could you describe for the record and for the jurors what we're seeing in the second page of State's Exhibit 210?
Yes. So on the left, you're seeing
Sorry for moving it on you.
It's okay. On the left photo, you can see there's two different black bag kind of images. So on the right one, the one that looks like it has handles, that is what I'm calling the body type bag that the item was delivered in. On the left of that is the black plastic and the duct type tape that is item 11, and that was the actual item that was processed. The one with the handles.
Could you do me a favor, just a second?
Yeah.
Just do me a favor. If you could you show the jurors which one you processed, please, using the laser pointer
Yes.
that's up there?
Of course. So this is the item that was processed, and then this is the item that was not processed. So this is just basically packaging. That's how I used it.
Okay.
And
so just let me ask you a question. You were pointing at the picture under which the title is called Item 11, correct?
yes,
And on the left-hand side of that picture was the item you processed?
yes,
And on the right hand of that particular picture was the item you call packaging?
yes,
Is that the item that the duct tape and the bags came in?
yes.
All right. And what about the picture on the right-hand side of the second page? I believe it's labeled item 11.12.
Yes, so this item here, item 11 in its entirety, was multiple pieces of plastic. Well, not multiple pieces, I'm sorry, let me correct that statement. A piece of black plastic with multiple pieces of tape on it. So taken apart, this is the bag in its entirety, is this picture on the right-hand side, and this is after processing. So what you're seeing here is just the bag part, and it's to show that this print here was marked. So that is print 11.12.1.
So when you say the print, that was the print that surfaced after you processed?
Yes.
Very generally, how did you process the item 11 so that the print 11.12 was visible?
So because there was both plastic and tape, I used two different processes. So I did the first process, like I described earlier, where I did visual, and then alternate light source visual, and then the glue fuming, followed by the dye stain, followed by the powder. That's what I did on the bag. On the tape, I did the same thing, but I added a step, which is using a liquid powder that adheres to the adhesive side of the tape to try to visualize prints on the adhesive side.
Okay. And I know you said earlier that usable prints were developed. Were they developed on what part of 11 and 11.12?
On the plastic portion, not on the duct tape portion.
Okay. And are we able to see, there appears to be some handwriting up in the corner of that picture. What is that?
This green Post-it note here?
Yes.
Yes. That's just my labeling system. I'm adding an additional label because the picture's taken so far away because the item is so large. I added a little note there to show.
Okay. And then there appears to be some yellow up at the top of the image.
The
Yes.
marking? Yes. So the half moon mark is just how we draw our orientation. So for a print, that's my indication of what I think the orientation of the print is. And then I'm just drawing on it to show that that's the latent number. So this particular photo is showing that the latent is kind of angled and the print number is 11.12.1.
Okay. And so is that the area on the tape, on the bag, I apologize, the area on the black plastic where you found a latent print?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say the orientation, that's the sort of the direction the print was facing or going on that black plastic?
Yes.
Okay. And so once you were able to develop latent print 11.12, were you able then to take and compare it to any knowns?
Yes.
Did that comparison yield any results?
Yes.
What were those results?
I identified 11.12.1 to the right little finger of the card bearing the name Alexander Lamar Cox.
Were you able on this item to make any more conclusions about latent prints on item 11?
Yes, I have another latent that was developed on this item.
And what was that latent number?
11.15.1.
Okay. Turning to the third page of your exhibit, what are we looking at?
This is a picture of the part of item 11 that had fallen off during processing, so it was part of the original bag. And this is showing the item after it was done processing, again showing my marking for the latent in this green yellowy color here.
Okay. And what number, I'm sorry, is it? It's kind of far away for me to
Yep.
see. What number was that latent identified as?
11.15.1.
Okay. And was there sufficient quality to that print for you to be able to do any comparison to that one?
Yes.
Who did you compare it to? What knowns did you compare it to?
For both prints, I compared to Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, J.J. Vallow, and Alexander Cox.
Okay. And did your comparison yield any conclusions?
Yes, I identified it to the right palm, so this part of your hand in here, to Alexander Lamar Cox.
Okay. And so evaluation of item 11 in the lab, the black plastic with the duct tape, yielded 2 latent prints, correct?
Yes.
And both of those latent prints matched the known prints of whom?
Alexander Lamar Cox.
One moment, if I may, Your Honor.
Yes.
And just a real quick question, the hairs that you were able to obtain and pull, those were submitted and retained at the lab for further testing if necessary, correct?
Yes, so I repackaged them into a new coin envelope just to keep them all contained, and then they returned to the original packaging, and that was, when I was done with my processing, that went back into the vault for someone else to check out if needed.
Okay, because you don't do hair examination?
No.
You don't do DNA?
Nope.
And those hairs, however, were collected by you and Ms. Dace and saved for future testing, either at your lab or another lab?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further.
We have no questions, Judge.
Okay, without any cross-examination then, that will conclude the witness of this testimony. May Ms. Martinez be released from any subpoena and excused?
Yes.
Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can be excused then.
Thank you.
Please take your time. We'll have the bailiff assist you here, and if it helps, suggest the chair. All right, at this point, I think we'll take our mid-afternoon break, given the timing. Again, we need to stop by 3:20 today, so let's try and keep this break as quick as possible, but I know it takes time with our 18 jurors at this point, so hopefully around 15 minutes or so.
All right, please.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, let's have the jurors brought back in.
Rise, please. Jury's all present accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. Okay, we're back on the record on case CR 22-211624. The state continues with its case in chief. Mr. Wood, if you'd like to call your next witness, you may.
The state calls Detective Chuck Consitis.
All right, just briefly, I'll inquire, Detective Consitis, since you last were here testifying, have you reviewed or listened in on or in any way read any of the trial testimony that's occurred since you last were here? No. Okay, thank you for that response. Then, Mr. Wood, you can go ahead and proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you. Welcome back, Detective. You've already been here, but just for clarity of the record, could you state and spell your last name for the record?
Last name is Consitis, Kunsaitis.
Thank you. Detective, you've already explained your credentials to the jury and explained that you've been involved with the case of the state versus Lori Vallow, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Detective, were you present at Chad Daybell's residence on June 9th, 2020?
Yes,
Did you take part in the search of that property?
I did.
At any time, did you aid in the recovery of the remains of Tylee Ryan from that backyard?
Yes.
The area where Tylee Ryan was located, was there a name given to that area, or was it was there a name given to that area?
The pet cemetery?
Okay. Detective, at any time in your investigation, were you a part of efforts to obtain satellite imagery of Chad Daybell's residence?
Yes.
Tell me how that came about.
So in late July of 2020, as the case was transitioning from a missing person into the homicide investigation, we were still monitoring the social media sites and came across a news story out of Salt Lake City off of KSL News. Their reporter was running a story that was centered around...
I'll object, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Your Honor, it's not coming in for truth of the matter. It's coming in to explain what the detective did next in his investigation.
All right. I will overrule the objection, but just indicate that it's for that limited purpose, and so to the extent it's quoting directly what anyone said, try to avoid that in your response, please.
I'm sorry?
So try to avoid any response that just directly quotes what anyone else said, if you can, in your response.
As part of your investigation, did you see a news story about satellite imagery
I did.
related to the Daybell residence?
Yes.
Based on what you saw in that news story, did you do anything in relation to that investigation?
So I followed up on the information that was depicted in that news story and reached out and contacted Apollo Mapping, which was the satellite company or satellite broker for that story.
Okay. And did you request any images from them?
We did. We requested any images, I believe from the 1st of August through the end of October for images with high enough resolution that we may be able to pick up details on the surface of the Earth.
Did you receive any images from Apollo Mapping?
Yes, there were 4 usable images that we obtained.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the witness be shown States Exhibit 142 and 142A. 142 is a business records affidavit that defense was given prior notice of, so I believe that comes in by way of stipulation.
All right.
Detective, do you recognize States Exhibit 142?
I do.
What is it?
This is the certificate of authenticity for high-resolution satellite imagery from Apollo Mapping.
Do you recognize States Exhibit 142A?
I do.
What is it?
This is a flash drive containing the images of the requested images from Apollo Mapping.
Is that flash drive in an envelope?
It is.
Did you observe the contents of that flash drive?
I did this morning.
Did you initial that flash drive?
I did, and also dated it with today's date.
Okay, and did you place that flash drive in that envelope?
Yes,
Did you seal and sign it?
I did.
Is the seal intact?
It is.
Your Honor, the state would move for admission of States Exhibit 142 and 142A into evidence.
Any objection?
Your Honor, States Exhibit 142 does comport to be a certificate of authenticity under Rule 902 of the Idaho Rules of Evidence. I do not object. I have not had the time since handed this Exhibit 142A to review it since we've been in trial. But so I'll conditionally not object if the exhibit contains other items on there, then I may bring up an objection.
Okay, I'll keep that possible objection under advisement. Exhibit 142 is the certification. It's admitted. 142A will be provisionally admitted, I guess pending it being published and making sure that it's not something defense counsel hasn't previously had or has any further objections on. So if you'll just move through things slowly if you do intend to publish it, Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, may I publish, and then I will do so slowly in a manner that defense has a chance to object if needed.
Yes.
Detective, what did you receive in terms of digital information from Apollo Mapping?
We received the images and the raw data that accompany each photo.
Okay. Did it come in a folder like that?
It was placed onto a folder like that. It was downloaded over the Apollo Mapping website.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to ask if the defense has any objection. There's these .tfw files which came with the Apollo Mapping, which is data, and then the actual images, which are these TIF files.
All right.
It appears to be what it claims to be, Your Honor.
Okay, so no objection at this point. Mr. Wood, you can continue to publish.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be handed again. I apologize. He should have kept that. The business records affidavit.
Thank you.
Detective, when you received that business records affidavit, did it include information about the photos you received?
It did.
Can you tell me what the information contained about picture, the date and time of picture, the first picture is?
The first picture depicted is given the date of August 27th of 2019 at 18:33 hours UTC. That's the coordinated universal time. But when adjusted to Mountain Standard Time, which is the time zone we are currently in, you take off 6 hours, minus 6 hours, so the time of day is adjusted to 12:33 in the afternoon.
Okay. Detective, is this that first image?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to zoom in. Oh. Do you recognize that property?
Yes, this is an overhead aerial image of the Chad Daybell residence located at 202 North 1900 East in Rexburg, Idaho.
Are there any landmarks that you recognize on that image?
Yes.
And if you could use a pointer just to point them out real quick.
This is the main Daybell residence. This is the 1900 East. And this is the detached garage and shop. Here is a marker. It's a large bush. We have a fire pit right here. We have a standing section of fence. It's like a wood fence that's got 3 or 4 rungs on it. It's about maybe 10 feet long, 8 to 10 feet long, if I recall. And then right here is a hitching post, which is shaped like an H. It has a large diameter post, like, I don't know if it's the same width as like a telephone pole or something. It's kind of a large diameter, and that's the marker. At the base of that, there's a marker. It was used for the pet cemetery.
Detective, can you tell me about the second picture, about the date and time it was taken?
The second image was taken on September 2nd, 2019 at 18:32 hours UTC. So again, adjusted for Mountain Standard Time, that's 12:32 in the afternoon.
Detective, is this that second picture?
Yes.
I'm going to zoom in on it. Is this the same property that you've been speaking about, the Chad Daybell residence?
Yes.
Okay. And the landmarks are the same as you saw before?
Yes.
Can you tell me about the date and time of the third picture?
The third picture was taken on September 9th, 2019 at 18:32 hours UTC, so adjusted for 12:32 in the afternoon.
And you said that picture was taken September 9th.
Correct.
Is there anything remarkable about that date in your investigation?
Yes, as pertinent to our investigation, we believe that's the time frame, the day that Tylee was killed and buried on the property.
I'm going to zoom in. Detective, is this that same property?
It is.
It appears there's some cloud cover on that, but is there anything about that picture that stood out to you in your investigation?
Yes. So, again, just to reorient, you have the main house, the detached garage and shop. Here is that standing fence section, and then you notice a large discolored darkened shape there right where the immediate area of the pet cemetery marker.
Okay. And what time of day was this picture taken?
This was taken at 12:32 in the afternoon, and approximately, it was less than an hour. Picture was taken less than an hour after we know that Alex Cox left the property.
Detective, can you tell me about the fourth picture?
The fourth picture was taken on October 25th of 2019 at 1842 hours. So adjusted for Mountain Standard Time, it was 12:42 in the afternoon.
Detective, I'm going to zoom in. And is this that same property?
It is.
With the same landmarks that you observed before?
Yes, the residence, the outbuilding. You see the fence, and you also see the hitching post at the pet cemetery marker, along with the fire ring and the bush for markers.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor. Detective, so this is the same property. I'm going to go back to the picture taken on September 9th.
Okay.
And zoom in on that property. In your investigation, was there anything significant about that discoloration you spoke about earlier?
That was in the immediate area where we tightly.
And this picture was taken September 9th, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, the state has no further questions at this time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any cross-examination, Mr. Archibald?
Detective, did you ask for all photos from this Apollo mapping company?
We did. There were several photos that could have been used, but due to the capabilities of each satellite, how it was explained to me, how they're programmed. So some are for higher resolution, some are for lower resolution. There's different elevations. So the satellite images that use the lower resolution will just pick up topography like shapes of the mountains and the hills and the layout of the land, where the higher resolutions will depict sharper images that you're able to discern, like a house or a vehicle. And so out of all those images, there was only 4 that used that high enough resolution for us to.
And are these from a satellite that only passes over the property every 5 or 7 days, or is it a stationary satellite that's continually taking pictures of the same place?
I don't know. I believe that the satellites are moving around.
Okay.
And orbiting.
And so, did you send them Apollo mapping a subpoena, or did they just provide these voluntarily?
We sent them. The images, or are we talking about the
the images.
We had to purchase the images, so the images totaled about $1,500 to purchase from the company.
I see. And so these images on the September 9th one, in your investigation, you believe this is the day that Tylee was buried on this property?
Yes.
Do you believe it's the day that she was burned on the property?
Yes.
is there any indication in this photo from September 9th of smoke or fire?
No.
And is this the day that Chad Daybell texted his wife that he's going to have a fire in the backyard?
Yes.
And when you were out there in June of 2020, was there evidence of a fire the previous fall, if you could tell?
No.
This fire pit that was there in June of 2020, had it been there for some time? or was it, or could you tell?
I believe it was there for some time.
So this fire pit that you observed in June of 2020, was it like for roasting marshmallows or burning limbs from trees, or could you tell?
There was evidence that there was debris that was being burned in there, and it also could be used for having a marshmallow roast.
Okay. And so in your investigation, have you been able to tell if Tylee was burned there on that property or burned somewhere else and transported to that property? I don't want you to speculate.
I'm not going to speculate. I just know when we were removing her remains, there was, you could smell fuel. So that's what I can speak to.
Okay. Any evidence of a fire in the fire pit and then having Tylee's remains dragged over to where you found them?
There were pieces of bone fragment and tissue that we collected that were sifted from that fire pit. So there was something there. Whether to say if they went from the pet cemetery to the fire ring or fire ring to the pet cemetery, I can't answer that.
Okay. And the image that you showed us from September 9th was that 12:32 in the afternoon?
Yes.
And a little bit cloudy on that day?
A little cloudy.
But as far as you could see on that satellite imagery, there was no smoke or fire that you could see?
No.
All right, thank you, Detective.
Any redirect?
Just briefly.
Detective, in the photo from September 9th, is the fire pit obscured by clouds?
Yes.
That's it.
All right, thank you. That'll conclude the testimony of this witness then. We'll have the bailiff go ahead and assist you out. I don't know if you want me to inquire if the witness will be excused or is he to remain available in the case?
Your Honor, we're just standardly keeping our law enforcement members available in case they need to be recalled later.
Very well, thank you.
I don't know if the court wants the envelope that 142A was in.
Yes. Could I have a very quick sidebar with counsel here? All right, Ms. Blake, if you'd like, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state will call Samantha Williams. And Your Honor, before we get started, I would note that Ms. Williams is a victim in this matter.
Very well. I was made aware of that. I don't believe the exclusionary rule would apply in this case, so I don't need to inquire as to whether or not any of this trial has been observed by this particular witness. So with that in mind, I'll just advise Ms. Williams, if you would please make audible responses, verbal responses to any question, and avoid talking at the same time as anyone questioning you. That'll help us keep a clear record. And with that, Ms. Blake, you can inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Will you please state your name and spell your last name?
Samantha Gwilliam, Gwilliam.
Are you related to Tammy Daybell?
Yes, I am. She's my sister.
Do you recall being contacted by law enforcement about a pet cemetery on Tammy and Chad Daybell's property in Idaho?
Yes.
Were you aware if Tammy had a pet cemetery?
Yes, I knew she had one. We had seen it when we had gone up to visit.
And I would ask that the witness be shown State's Exhibit 23A. I have 3 copies, so one for the court counsel, and then if we can have the witness shown one. And when you talk about a pet cemetery, do you know where it was located on the property?
Yes, it was on their property to the side of the red barn. They had a fire pit that we did have marshmallow roasts at, and there was a fence with a little dog statue next to it. My niece's dog was buried there, and that's why they put the dog statue on top of it.
And that photo that you've been shown, does that appear to be an accurate depiction of the property as you knew it?
Yes.
And, Your Honor, I would ask for the admission of State's Exhibit 23A. I'm not sure that it was previously admitted. Another witness may have used it.
Any objection?
No objection.
I don't believe it was previously admitted, so 23A is now admitted.
And if I could have permission to publish that to the jury?
Yes.
And I think there may be a pointer up there.
There is.
Can you indicate where you knew the pet cemetery to be located?
Right here in this little fence, you can see the little dog statue right at the base. This is the fire pit.
And how did you know, or I guess you've indicated that, was it common for Tammy to have a pet cemetery?
Yes, we all grew up with pets, and they were like our family. So when they pass away, we always buried them on our properties.
And that property in particular was, do you know whether that property is 202 North 1900 East in Fremont County, Idaho?
Correct.
Did Tammy love animals?
She did.
Do you know if she loved them her whole life?
Yeah, we always had pets, guinea pigs. She had ducks, like the whole gamut. We had all of them.
Did animals seem to love Tammy?
Yeah, she was a person that was, they were just drawn to her, and she loved taking care of them.
Was that the same way with people?
Yeah. She was a little bit of an introvert, but she loved people and loved taking care of them. She loved her grandkids.
And, Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be shown State's Exhibit 298. I believe defense counsel has already been provided a copy.
That's okay.
Do you recognize that photo?
Yes, I do.
And who is that?
It's my sister.
And, Your Honor, I'd move for the admission of Exhibit 298.
Any objection?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Archibald.
When was this picture taken, do you know?
It was taken at the wedding of one of her children.
Do you know about what year this picture was taken?
Hold on just a second.
Within the year or two of her passing.
Maybe 2017?
Yeah, probably 2017. I can't remember. All of her children got married quickly, the older kids within a year of each other, and so within the same year. So it was all, within the year or two of her passing, because she just started having grandchildren.
With that foundation, Your Honor, I don't have any objection to the exhibit.
All right, okay, Exhibit 298 is admitted.
Thank you. And may I publish it for the jury?
Yes.
How many children are in your family?
There's 5 of us kids.
Where did Tammy fit in that line?
She was the second oldest.
And how many brothers?
We have 3 brothers.
And you and Tammy were the only girls?
Yeah, we were the only sisters.
Were you close growing up?
Yes, we're only 4 years apart, and so we were far enough apart we didn't fight, and close enough together that we got along really well.
And did you maintain that closeness as you entered into adulthood?
Yes, we talked every day and saw each other every day, and we did everything together with our children.
And do you recall when Tammy started dating Chad Daybell?
Yeah, I do.
Did you know him from before?
Yes, his family lives in our hometown, and so I went to school with his brothers. He was older than me. He was the same age as my oldest brother, so he was not one that I hung around with, but I knew him.
Did you like Chad when she started dating him?
Yeah, he was a really nice guy.
Did you feel like he treated Tammy well?
Yeah, he did.
And then they ultimately ended up married?
Yeah.
And throughout their marriage, did you maintain contact with Chad and Tammy?
Yes, we were very close.
Was Chad in fact friends with your husband?
Yes.
Prior to Tammy moving to Idaho, how close did she live to you?
We were 2 blocks away from each other.
How often did you see her?
Every day.
Do you know how many kids Tammy and Chad have together?
Yeah, 5.
And you mentioned earlier Tammy's also a grandmother?
Yes.
Did Tammy want to move to Idaho?
At first, no. She doesn't like change, and all of her family was there. So in Springville, so it was not something she wanted to do at first.
Do you know whose idea it was for them to move?
It was Chad's.
Did Tammy work prior to moving to Idaho?
Yes, she did.
What did she do for work?
At the time that they moved, she was the special ed secretary at the high school. And previous to that, she worked at the elementary school as the computer teacher.
Was she good with computers?
Oh, she was amazing with them.
She was the go-to person?
She was the go-to person if any of us had a question about something that she could answer it, and she would pick up any new software and could figure it out. She was self-taught and was very smart.
And the 2 jobs you mentioned, she worked closely with children?
Yes, she did.
When they first got married, do you know what Chad did for work?
He was working for the Springville City Cemetery for the Parks Department. He was part of the cemetery upkeep crew. They helped prepare all the graves, and they took care of the cemetery, upkeep.
Was he also involved in ever digging graves that you know of?
Yeah, that was part of their job, is that they would dig all the graves that came through for any of the burials at the cemetery. Eventually, he came back and was the sexton at that Springville. It was at the Evergreen Cemetery in Springville. And then eventually he was a sexton at the Spanish Fork Cemetery.
How did you find out about your sister's passing?
Chad called me the morning that she passed away.
Do you recall what he told you?
He told me that she had been really sick and that she had been coughing all night, and she had gotten up and with a coughing fit around midnight, 1 o'clock and had gone back to sleep. And he was awakened by her that morning when she rolled out of bed dead.
Did that make any sense to you?
No, because I had just seen her 2 weeks previous to that, and she hadn't been she wasn't that sick at all. She was very healthy.
Did she indicate to you any activities that she was participating in?
Yeah, she was in a clogging class, and she was showing us some of her clogging moves, but she was also preparing to run a smaller race in their town. So she was trying to stay fit and healthy.
And how old was she?
She wasn't 50 yet. We were going to get ready to celebrate her 50th birthday.
When she came to visit in October, was that a normal visit?
No, it was out of the blue.
Did anyone come with her?
No, she came by herself, and that was unusual because Tammy didn't like to travel alone.
Did she tell you why she came down to visit?
Chad told her that she needed to come visit her family.
Was she able to see all of the siblings?
No, it was me and my mom and dad.
Did Tammy ever indicate to you that she had suspicion that Chad was having an affair?
No, she never said anything about it. If she did have any inkling, I think he probably brushed it away.
Did you notice any change in Chad and Tammy's relationship?
Yes, they stayed with us the first week in June of 2019, and something seemed off. They were very awkward at our house, and Chad wouldn't converse with my husband like they normally do. It just seemed really strange, and we weren't sure what was going on.
Were there any other instances where things seemed a little off?
Yes, in my birthday in July, Tammy showed up at my front door to give me my birthday present. I didn't even know they were in town, and he stayed in the car the whole time with it running. So she literally stood in my house for 5 minutes to talk, and then they just left, and he didn't even bother to come in and say anything. It was really weird.
And that was of 2019?
Yes.
Had you and Chad had any kind of a falling out?
No.
And, Your Honor, I'm noticing the time, so.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, Ms. Blake. Unfortunately, we need to break for the day so we can continue with the testimony of this witness tomorrow.
That's fine.
All right. Thank you, Counselor. That will conclude trial for today then. We'll start back, as I mentioned, tomorrow at 8:30 and plan on running a schedule until 1:30 with a shortened break time. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as we break for the day again, please continue to follow the admonishment to not talk to each other or anyone else about this case. Don't do any investigation. Don't follow it on the news. Don't look into it in any way so you can maintain your impartiality. And we appreciate you doing that every day. So that will conclude trial for this afternoon. So we'll go ahead and break for the day.
All right, please.